Okay, well, it is 12 o'clock, so we are going to get started. We are recording. Captions are enabled. Welcome to Infographics as Assessment for Teacher Educators by Branch Alliance for Educator Diversity. I'm Aubree Evans. I'm the director of the Birch Professional Learning Center at Branch Ed. I want to thank each of you for being here. Before we begin, I do want to acknowledge the disruption in our lives and the increase in traumas caused by the global pandemic and other things that might be weighing heavy on your mind today. I invite you to take a look at these Zoom boxes, even if you just see a name or a photo. This is our community, and we're all connected by a desire to make the world a better place through education. My colleague Juvel and I are going to briefly introduce ourselves, and April as well. Sorry to put you on the spot, April. If you haven't already, please enter your name and your institution and a class that you're thinking about today, a class that you're either teaching this fall or you're going to be teaching in the spring, because we are going to connect with that during today's session. So I'm going to tell you just a little bit about myself and kind of how this topic came about. I was a faculty member for 12 years. I taught ESL, English as a second language, in the US, and EFL, English as a foreign language, outside of the US. And I also taught research writing. And then I became an instructional designer. And that was when I received a certification in infographics. And then I moved into faculty development, and I've given many workshops on instructional infographics to higher ed faculty. I also had success using infographics in second language acquisition courses that I taught at a university that was also an MSI, a minority serving institution. And I'll be talking about that experience today and sharing examples from my own classes. I started using infographics because in teaching second language acquisition, one of the things I was teaching candidates about was how exams can be biased against students who grew up in different cultures. And I noticed that many of my students who grew up in different cultures were not showing me what they knew through multiple choice assessments. However, they were showing me in other ways. So I started using infographic assessments as another way for students to demonstrate learning. And my students loved the infographics. They always mention them in my end of course evaluations positively. So the examples I'll be using today are from my second language acquisition classes, but that does not mean that infographics are only for language teaching. They're for all classes and learners. I'm just sharing my examples from that experience. And I also want to say that I am not a visual artist. And if you also do not identify as an artist, but you still want to explore innovative ways for teaching and assessing, then this workshop is exactly for you. And then Juvel will be helping to facilitate and supporting this session today. Juvel, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Aubrey. Hi, everyone. My name is Juvel Campbell. I am the Operations and Outreach Coordinator here at Branch Ed. And I'll be helping out, as Aubrey said, with facilitation and everything. So if you have any troubles when we put you into breakout rooms, definitely just reach out to me. I'll make sure that you get in where you're supposed to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Juvel. And April's going to be assisting us today in the breakout rooms. April, do you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Certainly. Hi, all. I'm April Black. I'm the instructional designer with Branch Alliance. And my background is very similar, aligns very closely with Aubree's. I've taught many years in a variety of backgrounds in the education field and literacy specialist, background in curriculum and instruction, and then moved into instructional design. So infographics is a special passion of mine as well. So I'm very excited to be here and to support your learning today. Thank you.
Thank you, April. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the mission of Branch Alliance for Educator Diversity. It is our vision to strengthen, grow, and lift up the impact of educator preparation programs, or you'll hear me use EPPs today, at minority serving institutions, or MSIs, as being central to the efforts to shift the 20% of national representation of teachers of color to a much greater percentage of a diverse and highly qualified teaching force. In doing so, we can and will ensure America's children children receive the best education and support as possible. BranchEd's work is grounded on a quality framework for educator preparation, which you see depicted on the slide. This workshop applies the data empowerment framework principle, which is the brown cord and the braid that's just inside the turquoise cord. Its location in this braid indicates the role that data empowerment plays in holding together an effective program. And this workshop also integrates the purple section of this image, which is inclusive instruction. Infographics are a way to increase access to learning and to assessing for student understanding. So it really brings together the inclusive instruction and the data empowerment components. So today we're going to start with what infographics are in this context and why to use them. And then I'm going to show you ways to use infographics as course content, in part to model it for candidates. And I'll also go over guidelines and examples for creating effective infographics. And then in the first breakout room, you're going to co-design an infographic. You're going to create one with your group. And then I'll talk about how to use infographics as assessment. And then in the second breakout room, you're going to co-create an infographic assessment. You're going to make the start of a rubric with your team. And most importantly, we're going to have fun. Infographics are fun. So let's start. And if you have any questions along the way, feel free to throw them in the chat, and Juvel will read them out. Let's start by talking about what infographics are and why to use them. So let's define them. There are a lot of different definitions of infographics out there. Please enter in the chat your definition. What is an infographic? I'm going to open the chat and read these out. So this is your definition. When you think infographic, what do you think? Pictures that represent information or data, pictorial representation, a visual representation, a compilation of information that should be easy to read. Nice. Pics that represent info and knowledge. A quick visual used to relay info. Perfect. Yeah, these are exactly the definition that I just pulled from Wikipedia. An infographic is a representation of information, data, and knowledge. All of that came up in the chat. Based on my experience delivering sessions on infographics, a lot of people think about this image that is on the slide when they think about infographics. The definition that I'm going to be using today is slightly different. It's just a little more open, but it does not exclude this kind of infographic. So if this is what you think of when you think of infographic, or if your candidates think of this, then this is what infographics can look like in your instruction. And if you're looking for resources on how to make this kind of infographic, there are resources included in the one-pager that Juvel and I are going to share a little later. So when I use instructional infographics, I define them very loosely to simply mean information plus anything graphical or a visual display of information. And it sounds like our definitions are pretty similar because most of you have put something very similar to that in the chat. This definition is especially important when it comes to accessibility and infographics when asking students to make them. My definition includes drawing and really any visual representation. I use the term infographic to indicate that the image should communicate information and also to give people the option to make it as high tech or as low tech as people like or are able in the situation. If you're someone who takes terms very literally, my use of the word infographic in this session might get on your nerves a little bit because it is such a loose definition. But again, my reason for using it this way is really just about accessibility and flexibility in teaching. I want to give students as many ways to access infographic creation as possible. And this is all going to make more sense when we get to the assessment part of today. So now let's talk about why infographics. Dual coding theory by psychologist Alan Pavio is the idea that we have cognitive subsystems for both verbal and nonverbal processes. One is for language and the other is for imagery. So on this slide, we have two houses, a blue house that has the word nonverbal and a picture of a dog, and an orange house that has the word verbal and the word dog. So when we see a picture of a dog, we think dog. And when we read the word dog, we think dog. And if we know that we process both words and images, then one way we can have a more inclusive classroom is by offering students both words and images when we teach content. We can't say that one is more effective than another because there is conflicting data about that. And people with visual impairments obviously cannot see infographics. For this reason, they are better as a supplement, and we always want to use alt text image descriptions for online content. And if I'm using this to supplement a live teaching, like right now, then I'm always going to describe the image on the slide. So please enter in the chat what you see when you look at this image. So to describe this image, it is a simple line drawing of a kind of an iconic heart. So I'd like for you to enter in the chat anything that comes to mind when you see this image. A heart, love, Valentine's, 2 Valentines, love. Great, thank you. We got a lot of loves and a lot of Valentines. It's kind of amazing when you really stop and think about it, because this is a very simple image, but love is a very complex concept and emotion. So this simple image evoked a really complex concept. And this is why images can be really effective for teaching complex concepts, because we see an image and we connect it with a lot more complicated ideas. And as you know, as educators, some teaching concepts can be quite challenging to understand. Images can help us. What is another simple image that evokes a complex concept? Please enter in the chat. Another simple image that evokes a complex concept. Smiley face. Oh, that can mean a lot of things if you get a smiley emoji, right? It's heavily dependent on the context. Dove, peace. Oh, good. Skull and crossbones. Oh, this is good. A flag, peace sign, sad face, the recycle symbol. Absolutely. And these are great. Awesome. Thanks, y'all. Yeah. So there are so many ways that we can communicate complex concepts with simple images. So we're going to talk now about how to make your own infographics to supplement your lecture and content delivery. And I want to show you ways it can be done quickly and without art skills. You don't need to be an artist, I promise. This will also model how you can model the use of visuals to demonstrate learning. And after a few examples, then I'm going to talk about guidelines and tips for creating infographics. And then in small groups, you're going to apply those guidelines and those tips by creating an infographic in your first breakout room. So pay attention, because that first breakout room is kind of like your assessment to demonstrate what you've learned in this next segment. Okay, so this is the first example of an infographic that I made for course content. I used this in my second language acquisition course to supplement a lecture on sociocultural theory. This image is simply a group of people. It was a free image I grabbed off of Canva. So this would have been a slide that would have had just words on it. I went in like 2 minutes, grabbed an image, put it on there, and it just helped me talk about sociocultural theory, the complexity of learning with others, and it just helped kind of cement the concept for students and help them think about it. This is another example that is a little more complex than the last one. And the example is how to use an image to talk about learning theory. So this is the concept of language acquisition device that was developed by Chomsky. And when I look at this, I see a box, a square that to me represents like a radio. And this radio has some switches that are on, and those on switches look like green rectangles that are at the top, that are up in the up position. And then some black rectangles that represent the off switches that are down in the bottom position. And this represents if you grow up hearing Japanese grammar, then your Japanese grammar switches are turned on. And if you grow up not hearing Swahili grammar, then your Swahili grammar switches stay turned off. So this is a really complicated theory to talk with students about. My students would often struggle understanding this. And so I made this to help. I still had some students that saw this and didn't quite know what they were looking at. And so I did have to explain it in the context of a radio. So it still was a little complicated to talk about, but this image was a tool to help me kind of dive into the theory a little bit. So that's another example. And again, I made this in Canva. completely with all their free tools, which I will show today as well. This is another one. This is not a fancy infographic. This is like, I've got 20 minutes before class and I have got to grab some kind of image, just something. These again are all free, and I'm not like, Canva is not paying me. It's just a tool that I've used over the years. These are all free that I grabbed from Canva. You know, it's a cat writing to show the metacognitive skill. It's a primate thinking to show cognitive, and then frogs sitting on a bench to show social or affective. It's just talking points during a lecture and something to help students remember. And then the last example I'll show was a learning theory called complexity theory. Again, not a great, like most of you probably would not call this an infographic. I probably would not call this an infographic, but it's just little pictures that serve as talking points. So it's highly interwoven. It's not innate. It's not hierarchical. And the puppy in this image is sad because complexity theory is hard to study. And it's totally silly, but it made students laugh and they would remember this when they thought about complexity theory. Again, just little aids to help people remember and understand. So I'm going to now talk about some tips and guidelines for what to do and not to do in creating infographics. And you can use these tips to design your own infographics to supplement your course content. And you can also teach them to students in their creation of infographics. And they're captured in this one pager that I think Juvel just shared. Thank you, Juvel. So these are all listed in the one pager, and pay attention, because when we go into the breakout rooms, you're going to co-create an infographic and these tips will help you. So this is an iconic image of a rose. It's very simple, but this rose is a good guide to creating infographics. For one, it has simple imagery. It's not complicated. You know, we have the petals, and then we have the stem. It's pretty simple. We've got dark lines, super clear borders. You can clearly see what image is defined here against the white background. We also have two contrasting colors. The green helps the most important part of the image, which are the petals, pop off of the page. We don't want to use too many colors. Really, you don't want to use more than 3 to 4 colors in an image because it muddies the most important part of the image. We always want to use black lines, again, just to help that image pop off of the screen. When I think about a word called readability, readability means you can see this image from across a big room. You could be at the back of an auditorium, see this image on a projector, and you know what you're looking at. And these tips are how you accomplish that. The strong black border, not too many colors, contrasting colors. So that's what makes them instructional infographics. And then we also want it to be iconic. This is the tough part because this is boiling your concept down to simple icons. And again, it's really not about creativity. It's about simplifying complex or abstract concepts. And if anyone can do that about your content, it's you. And so I want to encourage you to stay away from things that refer to literary references like movie or book themes, because not everyone knows it, and it might take several cognitive steps to understand it. So an example, I was working with somebody years ago who wanted to use Sherlock Holmes, but it got complicated pretty quick. Like if somebody in your audience isn't familiar with Sherlock Holmes, either because of their age or their culture, then this will be lost on them. Even if somebody is familiar with Sherlock Holmes, it takes a few cognitive steps to see a pipe or a magnifying glass or a hat and put it together like what this person does in their stories and then apply it to this current lesson. So, and then this is the most important point, y'all, most important point of the whole workshop. The point of infographics is to add to your lesson, to add to your content, not to detract. So we want to do things that don't detract to the cognitive load, but that just help make your point more clear. So this is why we want universal, iconic symbols that are easy to identify in a quick glance. An example of this, an infographic I made in my class, was additive and subtractive bilingualism. So we have the plus sign for additive, the minus sign for bilingualism. In a quick glance, it just enhances the meaning of each concept. More universal symbols are a check mark, a gold star, an equal sign, even a sticky note. Maybe not in all cultures, but it's fairly universal in this culture. And they're so common that you might not have even seen these when you first looked at the slide because they're so automatic. Nodes to show relationships. It's very simple, just dots connecting things to show how ideas or things are connected. A scale I use a whole lot to show compare and contrast. You can use with a lot of different concepts. This is not the best infographic because we do have a line crossing text. I'll talk about that in just a moment, but I'm just being authentic here, people. I'm showing you my real class examples. An arrow to show relationships, cause, effect, or directional relationships. Again, this could be just a slide with words, or you can just add that arrow and it just helps people process from one broader idea to a more narrow idea. You can use literal images like an ear or a brain. They're literal, but you look at them and you instantaneously, you know what they pertain to. More simple images like arrows and files and a clock. This is my bad example. And it's bad because we have borders crossing borders. I mean, obviously, it probably gives you a headache just looking at it. We have borders crossing borders. And then if you notice, we have more space down here than we have here. So we always want to make sure things are centered. And then we have 4 different background colors that are too close to really have any impact. And they just make it too muddied and confusing. And then we have, not only do we have 2 different text colors, which aren't significant and don't add to it, but we also have too much text in each section. And then when it's possible, and it's not always possible, but when it's possible, see if you can get a pilot audience. I'm just checking the chat here. Oh, sorry. See if you can get a pilot audience because, so I presented on Daniel Kahneman's 2 systems of thinking to a group of faculty. And in the first image here, I meant to demonstrate a whistle to demonstrate Daniel Kahneman's idea of fast thinking, quick thinking. But about half of my audience saw a gun, and that shocked me. And the last thing in the world I want people to be thinking about when I'm talking about teaching and learning is violence. And so that taught me, like, always get a test audience when I can. So next, in breakout rooms, you'll have an opportunity to apply these tips and guidelines. And don't worry, I know I went fast. So these are all listed on the one page we're going to show in a moment. But you're going to have an opportunity to apply these to create an infographic with a small group. One of you should either log into Canva, and I'm going to do a demo, or Google Auto Draw. I'll demo that as well, or any tool of your choice. And you'll create an infographic with direction from your breakout room team. Then when we come back to the large group, you can share it out to the large group. So I'm going to demo this now. So first I'm going to show Canva, and then I'm going to show Google Auto Draw. So we will be popping in your groups. So if you have any questions with this or get stuck, we are here to help. And if you're extra lucky, you get April to help you because she is a genius with Canva. So first of all, Canva does require a login, but it is free. And there are a lot of images. So these are all the images I've made over the years. I've used Canva for over a decade, never paid anything. They have a lot of free options. So the first thing you're going to do is go up here to create a design. And then all of these different options here are just different sizes of your canvas. And so I usually do a presentation because it's a rectangle. And the first thing that you want to do is choose your background. So over here on the left, I have my tools. I'm going to choose background. And you can choose like a textured background, but probably just for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to choose a nice light color so we can put black text on it. So now we're going to add a title. So over here on the left, I'm going to click on text. It gives me 3 options for sizes. I'm going to do a heading because I want a title. So I'm going to click on this and move it to the top. And let's demo what is going to happen in your breakout rooms. So can somebody share with me a teaching concept that is on your mind right now? You can put it in the chat or you can unmute and contribute. I see something in the chat. Writing process. Oh, good. This is a good one. Okay, so I'm going to put, so this would be our infographic about the writing process. Wonderful. Okay, now this is where Canva really has magic for me. Misinformation, that's a good one too. We'll keep going forward with the writing process one. So now we're going to add images. And if we go over here to the left and select elements, we can access Canva's free image library. They're not all free, but a lot of them are free. So if we're going with the writing process, what is an image that might help us talk about the writing process? That's another good one, Norma. Teaching assessments, validity and reliability. A pen. Okay, good. All right, so I'm going to search for pen. And there are a lot of some good free options. I kind of like the colors here. So I'm going to put this, and then I can also reposition this to look more aesthetically pleasing. I can resize it. I can move it around. And this one even lets me change the colors. So if I click on it up here, I see I can change all of the colors of the pen. And I can change the purple, then I click on the purple. So those are some features of the images. What is, oh, paper. Good, thank you, Javelle. All right, so now I'm gonna search for paper.
Wait, before you go back to the pen images.
Mm-hmm.
What about that writing paper that's moving back and forth?
That has a little crown, so that means we have to pay for it. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I kind of like this paper because it has lines. It's too big, so I'm going to resize it. Notebook or journal, good. All right, let me look for a notebook. All right, as I'm looking for a notebook, are there any other images that are important to talk about with the writing process? Think about the writing process. Editing, revising, steps. Idea cloud. Oh my gosh, these are really good. I love the steps. Oh, look, that one even has an arrow. So this is a good one because it allows me to demonstrate another skill. There's something called transparency. So if I go up here to the dots, it's going to let me adjust the transparency. So if you want to have like to kind of de-emphasize but have something subtle, you can do that. And so we might want to reposition these to make them more aesthetically pleasing. I'm going to send the steps to the back so that I can drag the images to the front. So these are some other skills. So if I were to really use this, I'd spend a little more time repositioning these, but I mean, I think this is pretty good. Like we have things to talk about, right? We could show this and we could talk about all of these different elements of the writing process. And then to download it, if you go up here to download, you have all these different, you can do a PNG, a JPEG. I usually do a PNG, or you can do a PDF, so you can download it in these different formats. Okay. Great demo, y'all. Now I'm going to show AutoDraw. I'm really curious. I just learned about this. I'm wondering if anybody has heard of AutoDraw. So this is Google AutoDraw. It's totally free. It's very quick to get started. You literally go to autodraw.com and you come to this blank page. If I want to start a new page, I just go here to the 3 lines and I click start over and I can choose my size. And so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to start with a background. So I'm going to go over here and choose my color. I'm going to do a bright background again. And then I'm going to choose the fill bucket. I'm going to fill the whole background. Okay, now this is the fun part. Now I'm going to click on the magic pen here, the AutoDraw pen. And I'm going to go ahead and choose a black pen so that it shows up. This is very Halloween-y. I didn't plan that, but let's go with that theme. And I'm going to try to draw a pumpkin. And I've told you guys I am not a visual artist. I've never in my life taken a drawing class, but I'm going to try to draw a pumpkin. Ha! So the magic of Google Auto Draw is look what happens at the top. It offers you suggestions of what you're trying to draw, and you can choose that. And then there's your image. How great is that? And then you can go and add a title. If you click on T for type, and you can, I don't know what teaching concept this would be necessarily, but you can give it your title. You can drag the title around. I believe you can make your title bigger. Let's drag it and make it bigger. Well, it's not working with, there we go. And again, you can download it. You can even share the link. Okay, this is a cool teaching thing. You can share the link and then other people can add to the drawing. So that would be a really cool implication for collaborative drawing with students with an online class, or even with a flipped approach to teaching. Okay, so that is our Canva demo and our auto draw demo. And we do have time. Let's take a quick 5-minute break. When we come back, you're going to really be using your brains, creating an infographic with your team. So over your 5-minute break, start thinking about a teaching concept that you might want to supplement with an infographic, and go ahead and throw it in the chat. And it's 12:32. Let's come back at, and I see Lisa has put a teaching concept in the chat, planning a research paper. Yeah, Lisa must teach writing. Okay, so we're gonna get ready to move into our breakout rooms. Okay, so you will be sent to a random breakout room. I think we'll have about 4 people in each group. Your group will have 20 minutes to create one instructional infographic. Start by choosing a teaching concept, and you can all kind of talk about what's on your mind and then decide on which one you think might be the most fun or appropriate to make an image for. And then start talking about what the image should look like. And you can either use Canva or you can use AutoDraw, or if one of you has another tool that you like, you can use that. Or again, this is about accessibility. If you guys want to decide on an image and then have somebody, you can't see my paper, but have somebody draw it and then show it up to the camera, you can do that too. But for the sake of collaboration and discussion, try to come up with one image that you can create together and share back to the large group. So it might be that one person shares their screen and uses either Canva or AutoDraw, and then others give input. So Juvel is pasting these steps into the chat, and included is the link to the one-pager with the tips and the guidelines. And also on that one-pager are the links to Canva and AutoDraw. You can follow the links from there. And then when we come back, be prepared to share your image with the group. Okay, I think we're all back. So which group would like to share first? Please share your screen and talk through what your group came up with and how.
Do we pull it up?
That would be great if you don't mind sharing your screen and we can all be looking at the same thing.
Jessica, I'll let you share how we came about our topic.
Okay, so I'm a librarian and I teach students how to come up with research questions and use different search strategies to search databases, and then how to avoid plagiarism. And I teach them about the effects of plagiarism. So in this image, you can see we have in the top left corner and in the bottom right corner, there are books and articles. And so those are resources that students will use when they're working on research papers. And then you see one student looking at another student's work. And so that symbolizes copying. And then of course you see the two paintings that are the same. So that shows that the students are copying off of each other's work, and then they create like the same work. It's obviously copied, which that will earn them a failing grade. And in really severe cases, I mean, since plagiarism is illegal, it can land them in jail. So just teaching the repercussions of plagiarism.
Nice work, y'all. Thank you. Thank you. That was group 2. Which group would like to go next?
I can go ahead and share if I can figure this out. So Tiffany gave us the concept from her math for elementary class of talking with candidates about conceptual versus procedural frameworks. And so to kind of show that it's kind of in the math realm, we included some of the math symbols. And for conceptual, kind of the brainstorm to emphasize kind of the thinking ways that now Common Core emphasizes on the conceptual side, and the steps are representing the kind of procedural steps of following a math problem step by step instead of kind of using conceptual models to get to your answer. So I don't know, Tiffany, it's your content area. Is there anything else you would add?
Nope, you did a great job.
Nice job. I don't know what group number you are.
I think 3 maybe.
Nice job, group 3. Okay, group 1. Y'all ready?
Yes. Okay. We had put in the chat the link to the infographic, but I can share the screen. Here it is again. So the concept was co-teaching. So this is what we were looking for: teachers and different types of teachers, not just male and we were female. So towards the end, we were trying to get to something that was universal, but this is what we came up with. So this was my first time using Canva. So just navigating through was part of the task.
Nice job for first time Canva user. That's quite impressive. Thank you, everybody. I'd say that's great. Each group came up with a complete image that you had a whole like thought process behind it and it did what you wanted. So great. So now we're ready to talk about infographics as assessment. So I'm going to share my screen again, making sure I'm sharing the right screen. Okay, does everybody see my slide that says infographics as assessment? Awesome, thank you. Okay, so there is a lot out there about infographics as assessment, and I did include additional resources on the one pager. I'm going to share with you how I used it. And as I said in the intro, I did get really positive feedback from students on this. They loved creating infographics and they loved having multiple ways to demonstrate learning. So I used infographics for both formative and summative assessments. So first I'm going to show an example of a formative assessment. And this is kind of the most common question I get about infographics as assessment is, well, how do I grade it, or how do I assess it, or how do you make a rubric for it? Well, it's pretty easy, just like you'd make a rubric for any other assignment. So this is a rubric I made for, this was an in-class quiz. It was an infographic. It was for a participation grade. The criteria that I looked for was, is the information in an infographic of some kind? Again, pretty broad. You could narrow it down if you wanted to. And then I was assessing for the 3 stages of language learning. So are all 3 stages portrayed in this infographic? Does the infographic represent a good understanding of the 3 stages? Because that's the goal here, right? Are they understanding the content? And then was it posted on the LMS? Because I was assessing it that way. And so that's an example of a rubric. They had to do it in class, but they could choose to work alone or in a group. They could choose technology or paper. The only criteria was just to meet the criteria in this rubric. And the results were super high quiz scores, lots of collaboration, lots of laughing. And again, the really positive student eval comments, which wasn't why I did it, but it was nice to see that, you know, what I was seeing in the classroom reflected in that, because as we know, it's not always, student evaluations can be tricky. So this was one example of an assessment that a group of students created. I'm going to share 3 examples, and I received permission from all the students to show you these examples. So this was an example of the 3 stages of language learning created by a group of students on an assessment, and they worked in a group. They did use a computer, as you can see, and I can't remember what the application was. I don't know if it was a PowerPoint or something else. But this was one example. The next example, they just used pen and paper, and they had the best time. They were laughing. They came up with this student character, 13-year-old Renata, who is starting her first day of 8th grade in the United States. She doesn't understand English, and she's sitting by herself. Then she moves into the intermediate stage of language learning, where she's been using her prior knowledge. I didn't even ask them to use and underline vocabulary words. They did it all by themselves. And then Renata moves into the final stage, where she's now graduated and reached multilingual competence. Again, another vocabulary word. So I'm able to assess that they're not only do they know these concepts, but they're applying them to a scenario. And then this was, I have to say, not that I have any favorites in teaching, but this might be a favorite. This was the language learning sheep. And so the little sheep starts in the initial stage, increased cognitive ability, interaction skills, and then moves into the intermediate stage and is talking a little bit in the target language, blah, right? And then the sheep moves into the final stage of language learning where the sheep's just blah, 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 blah. And so it was just a really cute way to demonstrate the application of these concepts. And then I also used it for a summative assessment, very similar to the way that I assessed with the formative. My criteria were, is it easy? Is it in an infographic that's easy to understand? Because that's the goal. Does it represent a good understanding of the topic? Like, can I tell, because this isn't easy, you know, taking a complex concept and boiling it down to an image, it really shows that you know what you're talking about. And then the third criteria, does it show how the topic is significant in second language acquisition? So again, showing the broader picture of where it fits in the field. Does it lend itself to teaching implications? These are candidates who are going to be teaching. So does it show me that they know how to apply it in the classroom? And then of course, you know, if there's writing, grammar, mechanical punctuation errors, you can grade for that here as well. And again, they can complete it in class, out of class, alone, with others, high tech, low tech. You can include a reflection paper or an explanation or a video, so you can add things to it. I'm going to show you one more tool that you can teach students if you do have them demonstrate their learning visually. And this tool is called the visual alphabet. I learned about this at a conference years ago. The visual alphabet is a tool for those that without drawing skills. The alphabet is components of larger images. And the idea behind the visual alphabet is that if you can draw these items or letters, so to speak, then you can draw more complex ideas. For example, and this is also in your one-pager, this little chickie here, this chickie is made up of a spiral, a line, an arrow, and a dot. Okay, and then we can get more infographic-y with it. If you want to show cycles, you just need rectangles and arrows. If you want to show flow. So all of these are made up of these simple, I don't know what they're called, but kind of like letters in the visual alphabet. And you don't have to teach with the visual alphabet. It's just another tool to have in your back pocket. If students want to use the low-tech way, like paper and pencil, to create images, then this might be helpful to teach. And it could even help with their teaching skills. I remember when I started teaching with a whiteboard, I was like, I had no clue that I had to know how to draw. Like, I have to know how to draw to be a teacher. So it could help with that. And it can also be useful in note taking. I used images like this throughout my grad school program to understand what I was reading and my lectures, and it helped me remember and understand theoretical concepts. So we're going to move into our last breakout room, and you're going to be using a shared Google Doc to create an assessment with your group. So you're first going to identify, actually, let me just go ahead and share the Google Doc, and Juvel put that in the chat for us. Thank you, Juvel. So you're going to find the name of your group, and we only have 3, so we won't have a 4th. I can take that out. And in your group, you'll choose a title. What is the class for, or what is the class? And then choose if this is a formative or a summative assessment. And then go ahead and list some outcomes, as many as you think are appropriate. And then come up with your grading criteria. Again, as many as you think are appropriate. And then write some instructions for the assessment. So you will have, how much time is for this one? You'll have 20 minutes again. And it looks like people are populating into the doc. And yeah, we'll go back in breakout rooms. And then when we come back, I will share this. And then I would love to have people from each group kind of talk over your assessment. Welcome back, everyone. I'm going to share screen and we'll take a look at that document, and I'm going to ask for volunteers to kind of talk through your process. We were watching the typing happen. Okay, so breakout room 1, does anybody want to talk through your assessment?
I guess I can. I was kind of mentioning an ed policy class, and so thinking about having students use an infographic as a step towards preparing for kind of their final paper in the course, to kind of help them think through the policy issue that they'll be writing about, and making sure that they kind of know it well enough to present it, break it down into an infographic, and can kind of encapsulate it in a more simple way as they develop their paper. And so kind of to focus on the stakeholders that are involved, the problem that the policy is addressing, and the implications and consequences that can arise out of the policy. So and then the fact that they would be presenting it to the class to kind of get feedback on both their infograph and their thoughts, their conceptualization of the policy that they're going to be focusing on.
Did y'all encounter any challenges or hurdles in assessing this kind of content in this way? Or did it kind of just flow? It kind of worked out?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of one of those, like, on this side of it, we didn't kind of go, I guess, that deep there, but I can see kind of figuring out how to kind of differentiate the qualitative levels of what a 5 is versus a 4 versus a 3. Would be something that would need to be worked on in actually preparing the assessment for use with students.
And then would y'all sort of give students guidelines around what the visual, because I see here on the grading criteria, 15 points for the visual. Like, what would you be looking for? What kind of visual would be an ideal visual there?
I mean, I don't want to speak for the whole group. I was thinking more about the fact, not so concerned about the visual, but rather that the visual is actually representing, and that the student can articulate how the visual represents the concepts that they're going to be focusing on. So yeah, so I mean, kind of thinking more about like the content of the visual than the visual itself, if that makes sense.
So it sounds like it's heavily connected to the presentation piece, that explanation is needed to kind of unpack the visual representation.
Right, if they can explain it, even if it doesn't make a lot of sense when you just look at it by yourself, they could do okay in the assessment.
Thank you. Good job, group one. Okay, group two, who would like to speak over your assessment?
Tiffany had to run, but we went with like the infographic, like the whole concept of elementary math. And I think Norma and Patrick are still here. Lisa, I think maybe here and not here. So yeah, so we talked about that whole conceptual and the procedural math concepts like she had presented before, and we started talking through what we were looking for in terms of we expected this assignment to be worth 30 points, and in terms of there'll be 15 points for, you know, if we could see how the conceptual was done, 5 points if they could show step by step. There was also going to be a collaborative piece when we talked about where, you know, the collaboration among peers and to see that stuff. And then Tiffany mentioned the use of manipulatives because she's the math expert. And then the assessment part, I don't know if anybody else wants to jump in. Norma, Patrick. The directions where we asked them to, you know, develop the infographic that's going to demonstrate a math concept using a conceptual and a procedural problem. Go ahead, Norma. I saw your mic open.
Yeah, so I had to open up the document so I could actually read it. But yeah, so we were looking at what Tiffany was saying, what would be required for her math for the students to do, having them show their work using manipulatives. And then we wanted them to have peer feedback before they actually submitted. That's why we wanted a formative assessment. So it wasn't like a final graded piece. So they still have time to revise before they submit. But
And
also if they could understand, the peers could understand, I guess. Sorry, go ahead, Patrick.
No, I just wanted to say that we're glad we were able to do that, because actually we changed number 3. At first, we were thinking about assessing understanding of conceptual procedure, and we realized that was going to be very hard to be able to assess. So we decided on using the word demonstrating, and that resulted in how we are doing that in number 5 in assessing. Obviously, objectively, looking at those outcomes, being able to see those outcomes.
Wonderful. Thank you, group 2. Nice work. Well, good job, everybody. You created an assessment, an infographic assessment.
And one of the things that I noticed when we were doing this, Aubree, is that our colleagues in group 1 were looking at it through the lens of higher ed. We were looking at it through the lens of, you know, elementary, but because we're talking about teacher educators, this could be where we can model how to do this for the teachers who are going to be teaching elementary. That was an aha that I got as we were working on this.
Well, absolutely, because what is modeled in the teacher educator classroom is what's practiced in the K-12 classroom. Absolutely. Awesome. Okay, so today I'm just pulling up my notes here. We applied strategies for creating effective instructional infographics, and you co-design an infographic assessment for a teacher education course. Good job, everyone. We would love to get your feedback. Juvel's going to share a link to a survey in the chat. Your feedback really, truly helps us continue to offer events like these. And he's also going to share the link to our events page where you can register for future events. And I'll be sending out an email Friday morning with the recording of this event and again to the survey. Thank you all so much for sharing your Friday with us. It really was a pleasure.
Aubree, can I ask a question?
Of course.
Yeah, how would we be able to integrate Canva and Google AutoDraw into PowerPoint?
So can you clarify like an image that you create? Like after you create an image? Yeah, I can show you actually. Let me share my screen.
So it would be a slide to be able to import it into PowerPoint as a slide?
Yes. So after you create your image, are you seeing my Canva? Okay. After you create your image, you go up here to the down arrow, and this is your download options. And then you have a lot of different options. I usually do PNG because it's a good quality. And so then it's going to save this as an image. And then when I go into PowerPoint, I'm going to upload that image from my computer. And it's the same with AutoDraw. You're going to go to these 3 lines here, and you're going to go to download, and it just automatically downloads it. But another cool thing, this has so many teaching implications. AutoDraw, if you go to share, okay, I can copy the link and then watch what happens when I paste the link. So you could have a student create an image and then copy that link and then share that link and watch, I can start drawing on the same image. So you could have collaboration this way in a virtual environment. I haven't used it to teach, but I want to. I think it would work really well. Yeah, sure. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you all so much. Have a wonderful weekend.